Well, if you were to ever ask yourself, what are we focusing on in 2024? Our theme for the year, just a reminder, it's called Fighting the Good Fight in 2024. Last month, we had a theme for March, which was what? March muddiness. Man, and I wish it continued because I liked playing in the mud. It was so much fun digging in my hand in the mud. But for April, we got a new theme. Turn to your neighbor and say, here we go. You know what it is? Upstream. Ask your neighbor, do you swim upstream? Woo. My title today, theme for the month, upstream. Title today is Over the Counter. Over the Counter. If you were to Google what's the most effective medicine for pain, aspirin, ibuprofen, why? To bring fast pain relief, to reduce inflammation, to fight fevers, ibuprofen, Advil, Motrin, Aleve, Tylenol. I'm sure some of us, I named one of our favorites for somebody in here, right? Painkillers, they target the level of pain that each of us feel at certain times, and they stop brain signals by saying your back hurts, your elbow hurts, your tooth hurts. It's not getting rid of the pain medication. It tells your brain that you're not in pain anymore. It's not that the body doesn't hurt, because how many of us know when the painkiller wears off, what happens? We still in pain. We still in pain. So you're going to look at your little painkiller, you're going to hold on to it till we get to the end. But this morning, over the counter, painkillers, interrupting pain signals before they get to the brain. That's what a painkiller does. It interrupts pain signals before it gets to the brain. With that, John chapter 20, verse 24 this morning is our opening text. And it says this. One of the 12 disciples, Thomas, nicknamed the twin, was not with the others when Jesus came. And so they told him, we've seen the Lord. But he replied, I won't believe it unless I see the nail wounds in his hands, put my fingers in them, and place my hand into the wound in his side. 8 days later, turn to him and say, 8 days. 7 + 1 = 8. The later the disciples were together again, and this time Thomas was with them. The doors were locked, but suddenly as before, Jesus was standing among them. Peace be with you, he said. Verse 27, then he said to Thomas, put your finger here. Look at my hands. Put your hand in the wound of my side. But don't be faithless any longer. Believe. My Lord and my God, Thomas exclaimed. Then Jesus told him, you believe because you've seen me, but blessed are those who believe without seeing me. Verse 30, the disciples saw Jesus do many other miraculous signs in addition to the ones recorded in this book. But these are written so that you may continue to believe that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God, and that by believing in him you will have life by the power of his name. This morning, have you ever had the feeling of being left out? As a young kid, I can remember, not that I enjoy admitting this, but when I was young and not fully into my full sports toughness mode, but I can remember, back then, they have captains, you get picked, and sometimes you don't want to be that last person picked, right? That sucks. If you're the last guy getting picked, that's embarrassing. And then you get bigger, buffer, right? Then you start going higher and higher. But how many of us can remember, and I'm not saying that I went through that, but I'm sure, out there in the world, some of us have ever had that feeling of being left out. Sometimes in homes, can believe it or not, in marriages all over this world, there are husbands and wives who feel left out. There are kids in every home in all around the world that feel left out from their parents because the parents are too busy to care. There are adopted kids who do not have a mom or a dad of their own. And I guarantee you, every single waking moment of their life, they feel left out. There is a feeling, a tragic feeling in humanity, and it's the feeling of being left out. No one wants to feel left out. I don't know if you've ever been caught in the rain, and we've had the pleasure here in Hemet to have some wonderful rain recently, but it's like losing your key, trying to get in your house, but you can't get in. And mentally, emotionally, and spiritually this morning, many of us have gone through the feeling of, I don't know if I fit. I've been left out. Thomas, in the story we start with this morning, is a man who We all know last week it was an amazing, right? Sunday, Easter Sunday, Resurrection Sunday. It's the day that we celebrate the resurrection of Jesus Christ. Well, unfortunately, Thomas was left out because he didn't get to see Jesus after he rose. He wasn't. It was the girls first, right? The girls who went to the tomb. They were bringing some spices because God loves the girls, we know, right? And so these girls go to the tomb and they see Jesus. They get to see the resurrected Jesus first. And then a couple of the disciples get to see the resurrected Jesus. But poor Thomas, left out of the bunch. And so as they're having a conversation, there's some words that Thomas has. And how many of us know when you have some negative feelings, left out, dejected, depressed, someone has flick something nasty in your face, when you feel burned, when you feel betrayed, typically the words that come out of our mouth aren't very nice. And so Thomas has some very bold words. I think these are very bold words. He says, that's good for you guys. You got to see Jesus. And I'm so happy you believe in all this wonderful stuff. He goes, but I won't believe unless I see it for myself. And he didn't stop right there. He goes on to say, I won't believe unless I take my finger and stick it in his hand where the nail was. To me, that is like, this guy is going over the top. Like, this is crazy. And the funny thing is, he thinks only the disciples are listening. He thinks only the girls, because I know he didn't like the girls because they saw Jesus first. And I know he's mad at his friend Peter and John because they also got to see him. But he forgot who was listening. And so he's so bold. I'm not going to believe unless I see it for myself. Unless I stick my finger where the nail was. And then he goes on, unless I stick my hand in the side that was pierced with a spear. Only then will I believe. Now, interestingly enough, there's 8 days that go by. Turn to your neighbor and say, thank God for 8 days. Because we know that 7 plus 1 equals 8, which in the Bible means a new beginning. And in this moment, there was a man on the 8th day after the resurrection who was going to get a new beginning. And you know who he was? Thomas. As he's sitting there with the boys and having the conversation, Jesus comes in, and he doesn't even say hi to Mary. He doesn't say hi to Mom, blow her a kiss. Jesus comes in and he goes, who? He goes right to Thomas. And Thomas, go right ahead. Go right ahead and stick that finger right here. This is where I was pierced, right here and right here. It's the very first thing that he said. See, remember, if we rewind, he's being so bold because he's just thinking he's talking to his friends, right? He's just thinking he's talking to his friends, the other disciples. He forgets, as sometimes we do, God is always listening. God is always listening to my frustrations when I'm driving in the car and I'm venting out loud about other people, right? Venting, as none of us in here do, because we never need to vent. We're always even-tempered and we're even cool people. We don't ever get mad or angry, right? None of us in here ever. When we stub our toe, we bless the Lord at all times, right? Bless the Lord, O my soul. But Jesus, notice there's a couple things that happened. He didn't condemn Thomas and say, you're a loser. He didn't come to Thomas and say, I don't ever want to see your face again because you doubted me. See, sometimes as Christians, man, we are so mean to people who don't believe. We're so mean because they don't believe like we do, because they don't dress and walk and quack like a Christian. Sometimes we can be so mean to people who look evil. You just get near them and they have that sniff of evilness. It's like dust is protruding all over their body and smoke as they walk, and it's like, and that's how I picture Thomas in this moment. Because his heart was so broken. His heart was so disrupted. And his heart was so frustrated. But notice the care and the love that Jesus had for him. Even because, think about if one of our family members died. And we didn't want to believe that they died. And it's like saying, I want to go and see for myself. I want to touch the dead body. I want to see every single thing. Sometimes as people, we take things just a little too far. Thomas in the moment took things just a little too far. But God wants you to know this morning that number one, God hears you. And God sees you. He's not afraid of your doubts. He's not afraid of your concerns. He's not afraid of your questions. I don't know if you ever remember, junior high, high school, and there's a test or there's something that the teacher want to talk about, and you're like, oh, God, please don't call me. Don't call me. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. Don't call on me. God will never make you feel bad for the questions that you have. God will never make you feel bad for the doubts that you have. Now, see, there's the things that happen with doubts and questions. We have questions about humanity, questions about each other at times, and sometimes we keep those questions to ourselves. And sometimes when we keep those questions to ourselves, you know what we do? We start to ignore the people that we have questions about. And sometimes when we have doubts about life, and we have doubts about our bosses and doubts about our friends, sometimes when we do not do anything with these doubts, again, we start to become numb and ignore the thing that we're doubting. And so Thomas in the situation, very luckily, it really wasn't lucky at all, it's that God loves him. Came there, didn't condemn him. He said, Thomas, you can stick your finger right here, pal. I want you to believe. And he says to him, don't live another day without faith. Don't live another day without believing. God, what's amazing to me is we wake up, and whether we have sunshine, or it's foggy, or it's raining, all of it's amazing. If you study just the creation, if you study just the sun, moon, earth, and stars, if you study just our human bodies and the wonderful things that God has put together, there is no way that any of us can ignore that there is a creator, that there is a God. God is amazing, and God speaks every single day. It's just sometimes some of us have tuned him out. With that, we go to our next text this morning, John chapter 21. If you have your Bibles, John chapter 21, starting in verse 1. Later, Jesus appeared to his disciples again beside the Sea of Galilee, and this is how it happened. Several of the disciples were there, Simon Peter, of course, Thomas, who we just talked about, nicknamed the twin, Nathanael from Cana in Galilee, the sons of Zebedee, two other disciples. And Simon Peter said, you know what? I've had enough. I'm going fishing. Great idea. We'll come too, they all said. So they went out in the boat, but they caught nothing all night. At dawn, Jesus was standing on the beach, but the disciples couldn't see who he was. Verse 5, he called out, fellows, have you caught any fish? No, they replied. And then he said, throw out your net on the right side. Right side. Put your hand on the right. It's on the right side. Put your hand, throw out your net on the right side of the boat, and you'll get some. And so they did, and they couldn't haul in the net because there were so many fish in it. The disciple Jesus loved said to Peter, it's the Lord. And when Simon Peter heard that it was the Lord, he put on his tunic. He had stripped it for work. He jumped in the water. He headed to shore. The others stayed with the boat and pulled the loaded net to the shore, for they were only about 100 yards from shore. That's a nice little 300-foot swim, right? When they got there, they found breakfast waiting for them. So nice when you wake up to breakfast. Fish cooking over a charcoal fire, some bread. Bring some of the fish you just caught, Jesus said. So Simon Peter went aboard, and he dragged the net to shore. There was 153 large fish, 153 large fish, and yet the net hadn't torn. Now come have some breakfast, Jesus said. None of the disciples dared to ask, who are you? Because they knew that it was the Lord. Then Jesus served them the bread and the fish. In our last text, John 21:14. This was the third time Jesus had appeared to his disciples since he'd been raised from the dead. Sometimes in life I don't know if you've ever had a thought like running around in a circle. And I think that mentally, emotionally, spiritually, all of us get stuck in certain circles. Peter this morning, I imagine, as we read this text, was was in that circle. Because you have to imagine, for Peter, he was the most outspoken disciple. He was vocal, he was loud, he was proud, he talked a lot, he would beat people up, he would jump, he would swim, whatever it took, he was the guy, right? And sometimes when we have those kind of friends, we're like, that's cool, because they're going to look dumb, not me, right? We're like, let's put them out there, let's put Petey out there, because he don't care, he's going to look dumb, that's all right. But for Peter, who fished as an occupation, not a bad occupation, it wasn't the lowest income in the world in the day, kind of mid-range occupation. He was a fisherman. And anybody who likes to fish is like, that sounds good to me, right? I'd love to be a fisherman every day. I'd like to be on Deadliest catch me some fish. But for Peter, he fished all of his life. At one moment, he comes into this moment where he meets a guy. And his name was Jesus. And Jesus said, hey, come follow me. This invitation to be invited to follow this guy. And then this moment, there's not that many people who knew that much about him, other than his mom, his stepdad, Joseph, half-brothers, right? They knew about him. They knew that he was special. They knew something was different about this guy, but they didn't know what. Jesus didn't start a public ministry till he was 30. And he invites Peter and his boys, hey, come follow me. Peter's like, okay, sure, let's give this a shot. For 3.5 years, Peter and the 11 other disciples, they see things that no other people, they got to see. Peter was in the inner circle. He wasn't one of those guys left out because he was so loud and so forceful and aggressive. He was never left out. He was always in the inner circle. He got to see Jesus 24/7. He got to see so many amazing things. And then imagine as you walk with Peter for 3.5 years, you're so close to Jesus. You see all these things. And if you have to watch this guy who raised the dead more than once, he healed blind people more than once, he opened the ears of the deaf more than once, Jesus who walked on water, it was Petey who got out of the boat and said, let me walk with you on the water. Peter, who got to be a part of so many amazing miracles. After so many years, you're probably thinking, man, this is never going to end. This is so good. They're probably thinking, man, we're going to build like a big building. We're going to start making money. We'll start doing some collections. We're going to start doing this. This is never going to end. We're going to do this. We're going to do this. All these things that circulate through Peter's head. But next thing you know, Jesus gets arrested. Next thing you know, Jesus gets tortured. Next thing you know, Jesus gets nailed to a cross. And sometimes, no matter how good life seems, sometimes we end up in places we never thought we'd ever go. Mentally, physically, spiritually. Like being hung and nailed to a cross, this is like, whew, that's sad. And so the mental circulation and the physical and the emotion and the spiritual, everything's that's going through Peter's head. And then he's dead. Jesus is gone. He was going to be my future. This was going to be my new occupation. He was the jefe. I was the top. I was the next guy in command, right? Peter, all these things that he's thinking, but now he's gone. What am I going to do? What am I going to do? And then there's this rumor that Jesus rose on the third day. There's this rumor that the girls saw him rise. They saw him after he rose from the dead. There's this rumor. And then Peter gets to see for himself. And I have to think, man, all those motions start circulating over and over again. Oh my gosh, this guy lived. He died. He rose. He's back. Wow. But Jesus didn't stay with them 24/7 like he did before. He would walk away. And then he'd reappear and he'd come back into their life. And so those emotions were so heavy as things were circulating and wondering, what are we going to do? And so it was in between one of these moments of wondering, waiting, what's going to happen next, and asking that question, now what? What do we do now? What does God want me to do now? What's going to happen next? Peter finds himself, I don't know what to do. That's right. I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to do what I always know how to do. And that's what? I'm going to go fishing. See, when life throws us a curveball, when life throws rocks, man, when things are happening at a rapid pace, what do we cling to? Whoever we used to be. What's comfortable? When we can't fit in the outfit that we want to, we know there's at least one we'll get into, right? We have that one saved, those pants, those shoes, that one thing. If I'm not going to make it into that one, I know I got this one. I know I got this one. Because there's always one thing we cling to. Peter in his faith, he wasn't wavering from God. He wasn't wavering from Jesus in this moment. But he was looking for some comfort. He was looking for some comfort food. Just kidding. He was looking for something that felt right and comfortable because he had no idea what was going on. And so the only thing that he could come up with is, I'm going to do what I've always done. I'm going to be who I've always been. I'm going to go fishing. And he goes fishing, and he gets the same result as one of the very first times that he meets Jesus. One of the very first times he met Jesus, they go out fishing all night. This is one of the very first interactions with Jesus. They go fishing all night, and you know what happened? Nothing. But that's okay, because how many of us know if you're fishing with your pals or your loved one, your wife, your husband, and you fish all night and didn't catch anything, who cares? You're having a good time, right? So they went fishing, didn't catch anything. And Jesus gets into Peter's boat, and he says, hey, I need to teach the people here in the crowd. Can you push your boat out a little farther? And so he teaches the crowd, and then Jesus says, hey, now let's go out where it's a little deeper. Let's go fishing. And Peter's like, I fished all night. I played video games all night. I don't want to get up in the morning. I lost at poker, and I lost all my money for the week. My wife's going to kill me. I don't want to go fishing. I fished all night. My hands are tired. It's cold. I'm still a little wet. But okay, if you ask, I'll go. And they go out, and immediately they throw the net into there, and there's a miraculous catch of fish, so much so that another boat had to come and help. And so then you fast forward. Jesus rose. They're fishing again. They didn't catch anything all night again. And then there's a guy that's on the shore who they didn't know who it was yet. He says, how's it going out there? Well, it sucks. We didn't catch anything. So what does he say again? Throw your net on the right side. And the comment that he was making to them was really random. Don't we love random folks who just say random things? We're like, you're so random. Like, your randomness, it's starting to bother me because you're so random. This is how Jesus was. He was so random. And where he told them to throw the net, in their mind, it was a very random command. But okay, we'll go through with it anyway. And then here's another miraculous catch. 153 fish. Massive, a massive catch of fish. This thing is so big. Typically, this amount of fish would rip and tear any net. But what did it say in the text? That the net did not tear. And the minute they saw that, all of a sudden eyes started popping open. They're like, I remember this. 3 years ago, we went through the exact same thing. Oh my gosh, it's Jesus. And you gotta love Petey because he was in his undies and he puts his clothes back on and he swims 300 feet because he had to be the first guy to see Jesus. And he gets there first. And Jesus and Peter started having this interaction. See, Peter, I mean, we all love him for it, but when Jesus died, when he was arrested, he denied knowing Jesus, what, how many times? 3 times. So Peter and Jesus started having a conversation, and Jesus asked him, guess how many questions? 3 questions. This is what, the 3rd time it says that Jesus appeared to the disciples. On what day did Jesus rise? On the 3rd day. Numbers, symbols that all connect in the Bible. Jesus wanting God to point out how connected and interconnected every story, every single thing is in this text so that we have confidence when we read in what we see. And there's some weird stories, we know that. Doesn't mean we throw them out. It's just like us. How many of us have that weird family member? Sure, we'd like to throw them out, but we're not gonna. right? How many of us, I mean, honestly, we all know there's something weird in us. We all have one dorky thing, let's be honest, okay? I'm not going to tell you mine, okay? Only my wife and kids get that secret. My dorky secrets, but I do love Goonies. I'll throw that out there, okay? That doesn't make me a dork. Being a Goonie is cool. Anyway, Jesus asked Peter 3 questions. And you know what hasn't happened yet? And I think that this was bothering Peter. Jesus told him, you're going to deny me 3 times. And he says, I will not. I will never deny you. I'll give my life for you. You can cut off my arms, my legs. He didn't say all that, but he did. He denied Jesus after he said he wouldn't. And I think he was waiting for a moment. I probably should apologize to Jesus. So remember this circle of emotions and mental thoughts, all the things that were going through Peter's mind. I know one of them was, man, I haven't said sorry. And sometimes we go through this circle knowing there's something that we should do, but yet we have a hard time doing it. There's a thought that we have, there's an emotion that we have, but yet we have a hard time. And you know why that is? You know why that is? And this is why we get to our title this morning, Over the Counter. Have any of you ever heard of the Super Bowl before? Has anybody ever heard of the Super Bowl? Any of you have ever heard of the term home run? What is the Super Bowl? The Super Bowl is this day. This wonderful, sweet little, happens on a Sunday. Imagine that, just like church. We're 2 teams. It's the best, typically the best. They're going to face off. They're going to fight. They're going to kick. They're going to cuss. They're going to scream. There's going to be people dancing. It's wacky. But the Super Bowl is the massive super day of what? Football. A home run. If someone in baseball hits a home run, what does that mean? You get a point. You could get multiple points if there's people on base. People who shoot and play basketball, there's 2-pointers, there's free throws that are 1, and then there's the 3-point line, depending on where you shoot the ball. But you know what sports have done? And believe me, I'm not bagging on sports because I love sports, I love to compete, and I love to beat all y'all, anything I play. So we got to say that. But you know what sports have done? They made us chase a Super Bowl life. And you know what sports have done because of the Super Bowl, because of the commercials, and because there's things that we didn't want to see, but we saw them anyway, right? The Super Bowl commercials, the Super Bowl thoughts, the halftime entertainment that sucks, but we'll go beyond that one too, right? There's this massive buildup to like this massive celebration, like everything. This is the top, this is the peak, this is the pinnacle, and this is where everybody has to get. And so you know what it does? It's raised expectations in us that every single situation, our jobs, our families, our lives, it has to be Super Bowl level. It's got to be, I got to be entertained at the max. If you don't entertain me up here at this level, then I'm out. If you don't love me at that Super Bowl kind of level, I'm out. If you don't pay me the money that I deserve, you better believe I'm out, right? What sports and what Super Bowls and what home run and what other things in life, they have moved our mental and emotional capacity to everything has to be at the peak at all times. I got to run all cylinders. I have to run with my 8-cylinder plus. And if not, I'm disappointed. Have you ever been disappointed before? Disappointed is a hard feeling. Being disappointed. Not getting what I expected. Not getting what I wanted. And this happens in relationships, this happens in the workplace, and it happens in church, of all of our expectations and what we want and what we expect every single day. And when we don't get what we want, our attitude changes. And you think about the Super Bowl for a second. The Super Bowl, the amount of time, prep, and money that gets spent for that one day, it's crazy. It's so crazy. It's kind of like the election this year. How much money is being spent on the election this year? We're not going to touch that one anymore. But anyway, let's keep moving. The feeling of being disappointed causes pain. The feeling of stubbing our toe gives us a little pain. The feeling of someone stabbing at us in the back causes a little pain. The feeling of walking into a situation when maybe we think we're getting promoted and we get fired instead, that causes a little pain. Going to the dentist, those lovely people, and they do some work, walking out, could cause a little pain. And so what have we done? We've learned, there's something over the counter I can get. There's something over the counter I can get. But what is it over the counter I'm getting? I'm getting something that isn't taking away my pain. It's just changing the brain signal. It's just changing the brain signal so that I don't feel the pain, even though the pain remains. So what's happened to our world and culture today? We have been brainwashed to be numb. We've been brainwashed to be numb. We've been brainwashed, this is what you should be. This is who you should be like. And there's many of us, we've talked about this last week or the week before. I can't remember because it was 7 days or 2 weeks ago. But you got to remember, in this world, God is the only one who wants you to be you. God is the only one who wants you to be you. And not only does he want you to be you, he needs you to be you because he gave you a fingerprint that only you have. He gave you eyes and the imprint of those eyes that only you have. But what do we do as people? When we get around other people, we become like what? Other people. Instead of being who God made me to be, the individual, like Thomas. That was about Thomas that was so cool. His doubts, it's okay to have doubts if you do something with the doubts that you have. I have questions, I have concerns, but if I keep them to myself, if I keep my questions and concerns to myself, I'm going to become numb because I'm taking the medicine. But if I take my doubts and my questions and it inspires me to do something about what I'm doubting, if I take my doubts and my questions and I take them and I run with them and I'm going to do something with the doubts and questions that I have, the doubts and the questions, you know what they're going to do? They're going to lead you to the truth. If you don't ever give up, if you are persistent, and let's be honest, when we want something, every one of us, we are persistent. When we are hungry, there is no one here who needs to tell us it's time to eat. When we are hungry, we eat. When there's something in life you want, when you wanted a guy or a girl, when you wanted to get married. Last week we had the privilege of Brian walking up and asking Valerie to get married. That was the cutest thing I've ever seen in my whole entire world. That was awesome and amazing, right? Brian knew what he wanted, right? He went after it, right? We as people, when we know what we want, if you have doubts and questions, God does not condemn you this morning, but he's saying you should do something with that. Because if you don't, you're going to be numb. You're going to be numb. You're going to be numb. Over the counter. And how many numb people do we have? Because how many medications do we take to what? Not feel the pain. And how many of us, let's be honest, we've had painful lives at times. There are people who call us because they want, of all things, they want our money. There's people who call us names that we don't want to repeat because we're in church. Every one of us can probably bring up a painful situation. But what are we medicating with the pain? And I'm not here. If you like ibuprofen, it's not that I'm, just because I gave you one. It's not because I'm saying this is the only one you should take. Don't take Tylenol, it's the devil. Take ibuprofen. That's not what I'm saying this morning. And I'm saying don't take aspirin if you like to take aspirin. That's not my call, that's your call, right? But what I am saying this morning, as we start to kind of round the corner, many of us in here this morning, we medicate because there's pain in our life, and we'd rather be numb than deal with the situation, just like over-the-counter pain meds do. Our theme for April is called Upstream. You know what's crazy about swimming upstream? There's a couple fish that swim upstream. Salmon, trout. Trout actually has to swim upstream to breathe properly. But when you swim upstream, what does it take? A lot more effort. And in this life and in this morning, I wonder how much effort are we putting into finding the truth? We had Super Bowl last Sunday, Resurrection Sunday. Hallelujah. Woo! Right? But you know what? It's 7 days later. How much do we put in to find the truth this week? Are we swimming upstream, or have we turned our little fish bodies around? Because it's just easier to cruise down the coast. And there's nothing like cruising down the coast. Man, Southern California, we pay for sunshine, we pay for the ocean, we pay for the palm trees, but you know what? To me, it's all worth it. It's beautiful, it's gorgeous. But as we close this morning, the biggest question I have is, do we find ourselves swimming downstream in life because it's easy? Or have we headed the ship? Have we headed these fish little handsome, wonderful bodies upstream because we know it's where I need to go? See, change is this wonderful word. Every morning you've learned how to change your clothes, maybe even twice, 3 times a day. But when it comes to emotional struggles, mental struggles, physical struggles, spiritual struggles, we don't want to change because we want to be numb. And in order to change, I'm going to have to do something different than I did yesterday. And in order to change, I'm going to have to stop going with the flow and swim upstream. Jesus, in one of our communion verses, he's talking with everybody. And they're talking about bread. And Moses is like a God among men, right? It's like many of you guys in here, that's how I view you. You're God among men, right? Most of you men are awesome and amazing. But for the Jewish people in the moment, they hated Moses' guts. He led them for 40 years, and while Moses was the guy with the staff, and today we're going over here and we're going over there, they hated his guts. They hated him. They despised him. But you know when he died, fast forward a couple thousand years, man, they revered the guy. Moses was awesome. Moses was the best. We love that guy. We all loved him. Even though when they were walking with him for 40 years, they hated his guts. They didn't like him. They complained. How many of you ever listen to complaints all the time? He had over 1 million people complaining all the time. Me. Now that he's dead and gone, oh man, we love that guy, Moses. He was so cool. Even to the point where they said Moses was the one who gave us bread from heaven. They took their eyes off the truth. Moses didn't wave his hand and manna started coming down. God knew that they had a need. God cares for every one of your needs. God cares for you. God cares for your needs. God gave bread from heaven, and Jesus said that bread from heaven, he's here. In John chapter 6, 6 times, Jesus said, I'm the bread that came down from heaven. I'm the bread that will satisfy you. I'm the bread that gives you life. I am the bread 6 times. I am this bread that gives you life. No matter how many times we hear truth, we still have to decide to take and be a part of the truth. With that, let's pray. And I leave you with this. There's only one way to taste heaven on earth, here and now, and it's by swimming upstream. Have a blessed Sunday.